The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and/or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
Get ready to dive into the comic book realm where heroes rise and villains take the helm. We're here to dissect the stories and the art. A source material and tear the panels apart. Welcome to the source material show now. We don't hold back, we won't let you down. From Batman to Spider-Man, it's all fair game. We talk about the heroes, the villains, and everything in between. Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Savage, the sensational source material.
The sexy.
Oh my goodness. The slotified source material, if you will.
The slutty.
I was wanting to go and grab, take a look at the career of Dan Slott, and I'm going to share a picture with you. That right over there's Mark. I'm Jesse. How's everybody doing? We're getting ready to jump into discussing She-Hulk, as if you couldn't tell. We're going to be looking at, I don't know what this trade's called, Mark. Is it just volume 1, or does it have a name?
It is She-Hulk by Dan Slott, the Complete Collection, Volume 1, but I don't like it, so I called it She-Hulk, the Complete Dan Slott Collection, Volume 1.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
I'm being pedantic.
This has the first 12 issues of the 2004 run and issues 1 through 5 of the 2005 run.
Only 12 issues of the 2004. It ended with 12.
Right. I said the first 12. I should say the 12 issues. But anyway, so I go to look up his career, and I just want to point something out here. I want to throw this into our Facebook chat. You and our viewers and listeners may believe that you bear a striking resemblance to Dan Slott. I mean, you got the bald head, you got the beard.
Oh, I look like Dan Slott?
Yeah, apparently. I just threw it in the Facebook chat. Check it out. See what you think.
Okay.
Hey, I don't know. You could be moonlighting as a writer for Spider-Man at one point. I have no idea.
I didn't want to be distracted, so I left my phone in my room. So I literally have to go on.
Oh, he has to open up another tab. Oh goodness!
This whole thing, this whole operation could come. No, wait, did you put it?
I put it in our Facebook chat. Facebook chat.
Okay,
Facebook
just between me and you.
Mm-hmm.
No,
right. Okay,
oh my God! Oh Jesus Christ! Gee, beasties.
That looks like you, sir.
That is me in just a few years.
Oh man. Well, okay, so this is Dan Slott handling She-Hulk in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s. You ever read any Dan Slott that you can recall?
Yes, Jesse, we've had this conversation.
Did we? Well, let's have it again.
If you'll recall, he worked on that Spider-Man volume that I hated.
Oh, you didn't like it, huh?
You don't remember this?
I'm trying to think of which one, because we've talked.
It was after Spider-Man had, he had owned a company and he had banged several broads, and it was like a whole thing, right?
Okay, all right, I got you.
And then Dan Slott takes over, and he's back to being a teenager.
Mm-hmm. Right. I can't remember if this is after Superior.
Right up the wall.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's been a while since I can remember what I remember. He had a huge run on Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So with She-Hulk, so I assume you're in Ollie's and you see this thing sitting on the shelf, right?
I got this. We've already got a comment. Okay, so Gavin, far and away the best run the comic has ever had. Did not translate especially well to television. Ooh, we should talk about that at some point.
Oh boy.
That's from Gavin. Thanks, Gavin.
Thanks for tuning in, Gavin. Appreciate it.
What was your question?
I was asking you why you picked this book up, or if you picked this
Oh,
book up at Ollie's.
I saw this wasn't an Ollie's pickup. This was a regular like
Oh,
Barnes. I think this was a Barnes
full
and Noble.
price.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I love the She-Hulk character, and I had heard that like the quintessential She-Hulk was the Dan Slott run.
Mhm.
Like the She-Hulk that everybody likes is the Dan Slott run. And I don't remember exactly when I bought this, but it was before the television show came out. And I remember hearing as they were gearing up for the show that they were drawing a lot of inspiration from the
Mhm.
Dan Slott run. And if you watch the show, it's not perfect. I've already done a TV party on it. Alexis, Andrew, and I reviewed it, and I came to its defense as best I could with some of the elements. You can definitely feel the Dan Slott run inspiration in the show. They
Mhm.
stray away from it. There's a lot of modernity in there. There's a lot of agenda driven woke culture type stuff, which drives me a little insane, but it's not as bad as everyone thinks it is. And I would say, at least in tone, it's probably the closest thing you're going to get to a Dan Slott She-Hulk.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember enjoying what I watched of the series. Well, I think I finished it out, and
Did everyone in your house fall over and die when she dared I tell you what is the rump shaker? What is the twerk? When she sorry, words are hard right now. When she twerked with Megan Thee Stallion.
Oh, I'm sure that the daughter loved that.
Yes,
I
most
probably
normal people did. It was only angry comic book nerds that, and only the fattest and neck beardiest of the angry comic book nerds that had a problem with it. And the
I did not
critical
have an
drinker
issue.
who was leading the charge
Oh,
in his
okay.
Napoleon hat.
It's got some kind of a flag.
Mm.
Curious as to what's on that flag. Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate it. I loved how we definitely took the fourth wall breaking, which is what I remember of the previous She-Hulk series being, her being able to break the fourth wall, and that kind of was in the series as well, which is a great way of paying tribute to what came before.
Most
Go ahead.
modern iterations of She-Hulk were comedy books. It was. I don't recall too many. I mean, I'm sure somebody will like, well, this version of She-Hulk. Okay, well, I haven't read every single version, and I know that the early versions of She-Hulk, like the early Savage She-Hulk stuff, she's a much more serious character. But I want to say maybe from John Byrne on, she becomes kind of like a Deadpool-esque jokey character, and her books are comedy books. I mean, for God's sake, she's like teaming up with Howard the Duck.
Oh yeah, me and Evan Bevins took a few to sit down and talk about a couple. There was a little like a 2 or 3 issue series. Let's say series storyline in her book where Howard the Duck was in it, and it was Steve Gerber was writing it. It was ooh, man, it was out there. It was crazy. So yeah, I'm pulling up Dan Slott as a creator just to kind of give you an idea of what they have here on Mike's Amazing World of Comics. So Mike's Amazing World has him starting out in 1991. He's been a Marvel guy I don't think he writes his first DC comic until, oh my goodness, this is 1995, it looks like. So about 4 years he's steadily with Marvel. His first DC comics is Looney Tunes. He writes a story for Looney Tunes number 20. He does tend to write some wacky and silly stuff. Ren and Stimpy, Powder Toast Man. I don't know if you're a Ren and Stimpy guy.
I am aware that you should not pee on the electric fence.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, and I mean, he's got some Ghost Rider under his belt here. But it looks like, Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs. So he's really like involved in a lot of the Warner Brothers stories, Warner Brothers animation stories. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, he gets on She-Hulk here. This is in 2004. His Spider-Man run doesn't start, I think, until 2000. Gosh, I want to say it's 2012. Nope. Hold on. I'm getting there. Looks like it was, man, oh man, he had a huge run on this thing. Amazing Spider-Man.
Do you remember
546, 2008? Go ahead.
Was the episode that we talked about that? Was that the one where you had me and Ronnie come on, and it was a What You Reading episode, and I talked about the wedding and cried because Batman was left at the altar by Catwoman, and then Ronnie had the temerity to bring up the Dan Slott Spider-Man and say, that he thought it was fine, and I yelled at him for that too.
It's a possibility.
I feel like that's how that went.
That's a very good possibility. My goodness. All right. Well, let's talk about what's happening here. We're going to be discussing and breaking this up for 3 episodes on the Source Material podcast, but we're going to be talking them all here tonight on as this is being shared online on YouTube. We're going to be talking 1 through 12. Our first segment is going to be the first 6 issues. Then the last 6 issues of the 2004 run will be the next episode. And then episode 3 that I plan on breaking this up into will be the first 5 issues of the 2005 run.
Time trials, baby.
Yeah. Wow. Boy, oh boy, am I a fan. Count me in. So let me tell you about the creative team here on the book first. So issues 1 through 4 have Dan Slott, and Dan Slott is writing all of these. So I won't really,
that's why his name is in the title.
Believe it or not. Dan Slott writing, penciler Juan Bobbio, inker Marcelo Sosa, letterer David Sharp, and colorist Christopher Chuckry. This is issues 1 through 4. Issue 5 is penciled by Paul R. Pelletier and inked by Tom Simmons, colored by Brian Haberlin. Rest of the creative team remains the same. And then issue 6, the only thing that changes from that creative team is the inker becomes Roland Paris. So, all right, just a real quick breakdown, Mark. I'm not going to go into everything here that happens in all 6 of these issues because I want to get to some of the fun themes that are talked about in these first 6. But our first issue, we get introduced to She-Hulk and her partying ways, I guess we would say. And the Avengers are getting a little tired of her stuff, especially Jarvis. Jarvis is a little tired of her coming in there and breaking things and him having
to clean. For God's sake, She-Hulk, stop whoring around.
There's an interesting bit where she's sleeping with like a model, a male model, but you could tell immediately right away that she has an issue with being, just plain old Jen Walters. She's got to be She-Hulk. She's got to keep that image up, and she's afraid. I wouldn't say afraid, but the man that she's involved with, she's afraid of not being She-Hulk around this guy. To the point where there's a bit where she wakes up after a night of fun, and he's laying with his arm on top of her, and she realizes she's Jen, and she's like, no, I've got to change back, and promptly changes back and throws him from the bed, which is hilarious. But yeah, we kind of get an idea of her. I put down here a life of indulgence and minimal responsibility, along with a bit of immaturity. So it seems like she's got a little bit of growing she needs to do here. We can see in issue 1.
Did you ever see the movie Teen Wolf?
Yeah.
It's right out of Teen Wolf. Like, once you realize you have these like superpowers and this is the version of you everybody likes, who wants to go back to being their old dumpy self?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And because she's She-Hulk and she's an Avenger and a former Fantastic Four member and a celebrity and, a rich lawyer, she's just able to live it up, be a party girl. Like, it's funny. I wish the show had been handled better. Because there was some grist for the mill to kind of talk about, not in the way they did it, but in a different way, the modern woman, the modern successful free woman. How does she behave? What does she do? What does she learn about herself in the process? And that's kind of where we start with her.
Right. And then by the end of issue 1, she impresses, or maybe she's being sought out, a guy by the name of Holloway. He is a...
Well, hang on. You're missing a major thing here. And you didn't ask me about it. And I'm sad. Okay.
Oh,
but
right.
The reason why part of the reason why I wanted to talk about, there were many She-Hulks we could have talked. We could have talked about the John Byrne run.
Right? Oh, yeah.
We could have talked about Savage She-Hulk. We could have talked about any number of different iterations. I specifically wanted to do this one because it was in part a legal book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of focus on her being a lawyer in this iteration, which I love. And want to know why, Jesse Starcher? Because I love a good legal drama.
Yes, you do.
And in another life, in a life where I made better choices than the one I made in this life, I become a lawyer.
You would have been a lawyer. Well, that takes some commitment. Yeah,
and probably better memorization in the brain than I've got. Words are hard. But yeah, I love a good legal drama. I love legal wrangling. I'm not litigious in the sense of I don't go around suing people, but you've been working with me for it's the year
at least 10.
25. Yeah, well, I mean, no, I think you started bothering me around the time my daughter was born. I started doing this, so probably 2011, 2012, 2013, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I guess whenever I started doing the Metal Hammer of Doom, that's when you started. I think it was the first thing you started listening to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were already listening to the Casual Heroes at the time. So
Right.
that has to be 2012, 2013. And so yeah, so you've been working with me for a long time now. I like a good argument.
You like to hear good. You like to hear sides. As a matter of fact, I think there is a show on this network
That is true. Yes.
that is called On Trial.
Yes. Very sexy show called On Trial.
Oh yes, hit that saxophone, baby.
I wanted to do a joke about the lyrics of our intro, and I can't fucking remember anything right now. Anyway, I very much like a nice legal argument,
Sure.
and I like to kind of pick out the minutiae of things, and I like to watch shows about it. I like to watch shows about or movies where you're trying to win a trial of some kind or figure out some sort of legal precedent. Like all this stuff is very appealing to me. And that's all in this She-Hulk book. They lean very heavily on it. And
Right.
the reason why I stopped you and said you have to bring this up, this is a pivotal point in the book. Right in issue 1 or 2, I think this comes up. There's the whole idea of like getting all of your cases thrown out. Like for example, if it's found out that you were trying your cases and you were drunk at the time and no one knew about it, and it can be proved that you were, and it gets somebody off, they can go back through your entire backlog of cases and throw them out, and throw the sentencing out, right? And I can't remember what the exact detail in the book is, but there's something along the lines of she loses a case due to the fact that she's She-Hulk, and it sets a precedent to where because she's working for the district attorney's office, so I think she's a prosecutor. So she's prosecuting criminals, and I think it's like her involvement with the criminals as She-Hulk makes her unable to then prosecute. There's some sort of thing about she unethically can't deal with them in a court of law because she dealt with them as an Avenger. Which means that now every case that she's ever prosecuted is at risk of being thrown out. So she gets fired from the district attorney's office.
Right. They let her go.
Right, because she's useless now. And when she gets recruited by the best law firm on the East Coast, it is specifically, and this is right in the show, she is specifically recruited to deal with superhuman law cases. She's specifically there to deal with superheroes and supervillain cases, right? And they don't want her to do it as She-Hulk. They want her as Jen Walters, and there's a whole other like subplot about that they get into later. But like that's the impetus of the book, is she is in love with being She-Hulk because she feels like it's her best self, to the point where, kind of like Bruce Wayne and Batman, where her true identity is one that she doesn't see any value in. She's this mousy woman, who could never bed these supermodel men as herself. She would never have the confidence that she does. None of this stuff would be happening in her life if she weren't She-Hulk. So she doesn't want to be Jen Walters. She wants to be She-Hulk all the time.
Yeah, now she wants to be seen as She-Hulk.
And now she can't be. She has to actually be Jen Walters. She has to do her job as Jen Walters because She-Hulk in this role has no value. Yeah. And she kind of has to learn to love herself as she is and not be utterly reliant on the She-Hulk identity, which I think is a brilliant piece of writing. Go ahead and do your thing. I want to see if I can actually find like what the actual thing is from the first issue.
Yeah, something ends up happening. I know the spot that you're talking about there, because the case ends up getting thrown out, just like you're talking about, but I can't remember the specifics behind as to why. But I know she's like really upset about it.
I literally turned right to the page. Okay. So Goodman, Lieber, Kurtzman, and Holloway just successfully got a mistrial on the Paxton case. No freaking way! With the pounding, shit. Oi, with the pounding.
Oi, vey.
in the series that I direct.
Yeah.
Very Jewish.
Okay, gotcha.
Boy, with the pounding and the She-Hulking. Oh God.
Oh, I can't take it no more.
Sorry, but how? 2 days ago, you and the Avengers saved the lives of. This is it. This is the precedent. 2 days ago, you and the Avengers saved the lives of everyone on Earth. That included the last jury. It could be argued this gave you undue leverage over them, and that would explain their speedy verdict.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous precedent, Jen, and it could open a lot of old doors. I can't take that kind of pressure anymore, kid. Before you joined my team, I was a fit, robust man with a full head of hair. God, he sounds like me. Now look at me. You're letting me go. I'm sorry, Jen, but in the end, the deciding factor was your attitude. We do serious work here. I am very serious. Jen, last night, again, it sounds like me. Jen, last night you crushed one of our copiers taking pictures of your butt. How did you know it was me? How could it could have been anyone? It was a color copier, Jen. So I love that idea of she's an Avenger. She saves people. Those people would be beholden to her to want to give her
biased.
her way. They'd be biased. Therefore,
Right.
how can they possibly use her?
Exactly.
That's fucking great writing.
Yeah. And then at the end of issue 1, the firm that she just lost to, the guy that owns that firm or runs that firm, Holden Holloway, I figured out his name here, shows up after she had been drinking in the bar with the Blizzard or whatever the heck his name is. I can't remember his name, but the supervillain that shows up there. Anyway, she is completely drunk as She-Hulk. And he comes up to her and he offers her a job, and she's, number one, awestruck. And then
I think she's not drunk as She-Hulk. Because Hulks can't get drunk.
She was drinking quite a bit, and the Holden says, "Look, I want you, but I do not want She-Hulk. I want Jen Walters."
They've just established that if She-Hulk tries these cases and it's a jury trial, we've already said that she's going as She-Hulk. She'll what do you call it? Queer the
sway.
Yeah, she'll sway the jury.
Right,
by nature of who she is.
Right. And then my favorite bit at the end of the issue is when she changes back to Jen Walters, promptly throws up on the guy that just offered her a job,
that's good shit.
And then passes out.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. As a Hulk, her body mass and metabolism, she can't get drunk. They actually said that in the show. Yeah. And then she changed back to Jen Walters. It's the same level of alcohol consumption in this dainty woman's body.
All of it comes out. So then we get to issue 2. Issue 2 is her getting ready to go for her first day at GLKH, I think is the name of the firm there. And she's trying to find something to wear. She's hanging out with Scarlet Witch and Janet Van Dyne. Scarlet Witch casts a spell, which is very important as it comes up later, that because Jen's worried that people are going to attack Jen as Jen. Because they know who she is, and she may not have a fair shot, not change. She's not going to be in her She-Hulk form in order to defend herself. So Scarlet Witch casts a spell that says, okay, if anybody wishes to do She-Hulk harm, they cannot see you. They won't know that you are there.
There are so many Chekhov's guns in this series. So much stuff gets established in the first half that gets paid off in the second half.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So her first day at Timely Plaza. Timely, by the way, is a nice little Marvel reference there. Timely Plaza. She's learning about that they do superhuman law. We see some of the people that she's going to run into. We get introduced to Awesome Andy, the awesome android, which used to be a supervillain, but is now working for the firm, and he's the gopher for some people.
Created by the Mad Thinker.
Right. We meet Ditto, who is a shapeshifter, who is a great process server. I think
he's a process server because he shapeshifted to somebody who you wouldn't trust.
Right.
Like if it's like he shapeshifted to my kid or something, and like hands me something like, "Oh, you've been served." I'm like, "God damn it, fooled again." Dang
it. Then we learn about their legal records, which are actual comic books. In the bottom of the basement of this firm, they have legal records, which are comic books, and they use them to reference things all the time to help their superhero law practice.
You can't just leave that out there. You have to actually explain it. So they said that everything that happens in this world gets made into comic books. Those comic books are signed off on by current day Avengers. But what about the Avengers of antiquity? What about before they started doing this? Those are stamped by the Comics
Code Authority.
And that's a government oversight group, which makes them legal documents.
Mm.
Yay! Like this is my
And
kind of comic.
And it's not just like this is a cute little reference because this stuff comes up over and over and over again.
Yeah.
There's, I mean, at the end of this series, we're going to be going back to the archives and checking out these
Dude,
comics.
the thing that Gus says about fucking trades, I was thinking about you. And like, some of the comic guys I know that is like trades will be the death of comics. I'm thinking of Chris Bailey. Trades will be the death of comics, and I'm just sitting there like the book is amusing, but there were not many belly laughs out of me. There were not a lot of like laugh out loud moments. That got a laugh out loud moment out of me.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're talking. You know, some of these concepts are being talked about here in this that are being talked about here in this series. You know, we're 20 years out from that, and it's pretty funny still. So, all right, we get her first case, which is with Danger Man, where this guy gets turned into a very a massive, like, just super powered individual, and he's just trying to get compensation because he feels that, you know, he didn't want what happened to him, and he feels that the company's responsible.
He's actually hurt his wife. He, you know, like I love the concept of a Danger Man type character, because what if any one of us, you know, schlubs, you know, suddenly got a superpower that was so powerful that if we don't know how to control it from the get-go, we hurt everyone around us. You know, what if you don't have the mentality of a Captain America or Tony Stark or, you know, Clint Barton guy? You know, what if you just don't have it in you, but you are now given crazy powers, you know? So, like, you're not a bad person, but you're not necessarily wanting to be a hero either. What are you supposed to do with this? Like, it gets argued in the book that the company that he got the powers from caused him harm by changing his body into this being with superpowers, because we take for granted that if you ever got a superpowers, your life would be awesome. Would it?
Right.
You know, if you're accidentally hurting everyone around you because you don't know how to control what you're doing, you know, or it cost you, you know, again, it cost you money and medical bills, it cost you your job, you know, it's all kinds of things. And I'm like, that's one of the things I really liked about this book was it deconstructs and editorializes the genre of superheroes without being all mopey about it the way Alan Moore tends to be, or Garth Ennis. Somewhere out there, Evan Bevins is like, you know, is agreeing with me that Dan Slott's approach to deconstructing comic books and superheroes is a much brighter and happier and interesting way of doing it than the Garth Ennis version, which tends to be super bleak. He's the guy that did The Boys.
Right. I think a lot, and we're only into issue 2 here, but a lot of what you get with this, this
be
whole
prepared
series,
to record for the next 9 hours. I have so much to say.
A lot of what we get in these issues are statements or commentary on identity. Like how you look at yourself, how other people look at you. And that's definitely on spotlight here with Danger Man, how he sees himself. His wife at one point is just laying in bed thinking that he's going to go off and be a superhero. And, you know, he's going to bet all these beautiful super ladies. And that's not what he wants to do. And at that point, when the climax of that issue is when him and She-Hulk just about, you know, have it out. They're about to fight, and she changes into Jen Walters because she knows that he does not want to hurt anybody. And
he's committing suicide is what he's doing.
Right. He's planning on destroying himself. And she's like, no, if you're going to do this, you're going to take me with you. And I know you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And he, you know, finally gets him to back down. And then, of course, she goes into court and is able to win the legal battle by like saying that, okay, yeah, on this date that he turned into the superhero, he was dead. You essentially killed him. But also in She-Hulk's arc here, by the end of issue 2, you can tell she's getting a little bit more comfortable with herself as Jen Walters, and, you know, being able to argue as that. Now, going into issue 3, we this is the issue with Bailey Briggs, the guy that ends up getting killed and then proceeds to testify as a ghost for himself, which is great. We have our first appearance of Pug. Oh my goodness, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Pugiles. Just goes by Pug, who is, you know, I feel so sorry for Pug. Man,
that is me and every other guy I've ever known.
There's a moment where
I'm helpful and good, and I love you, and you keep going with another guy.
Yep. Jen's worried in this issue that the firm only brought her in because of her superhero contacts. She felt that maybe that would help her. She thinks that they believe that would help them win cases. And so she feels kind of manipulated and used a little bit. Either way, there's a great moment.
That's only going to get worse.
There's a great moment where She-Hulk goes back into the Avengers Mansion, which, by the way, she had left. And when she walked in,
leave, they were like, "Please, you can't live here anymore. You
right.
Whore. Like, get out." So she's living in like an apartment building that's owned by the law firm.
Yeah, right. She ends up going back into Avengers Mansion, and I love there's a moment where like the security system goes off, and Jarvis comes running out here, and you may not get the reference, I don't know, but Jarvis has a pot on his head, and he says it's made of Forbusian alloy. Which, have you ever heard of Forbush? I think it's Forbush Man. He is a Howard the Duck villain, I believe. Well, I could be wrong. I'd have to look this up, make sure. Have you ever seen like the superhero with just a pot on his head and he had the eyes? Okay, that's Forbush Man. So there you go. I thought that was hilarious.
I'll tell you, because Jarvis was never a person in the Marvel movies, it was always an AI. People have really missed out on the character that Jarvis was from the Avengers comics. He was a fun character. Like I kind of want like a one shot of like a drama, a very talky drama of him talking to Alfred.
Yes, please. All right. And then in this issue, there's the case that goes live is like they're trying to figure out how to justify putting Bailey Briggs on the stand as a ghost, and they bring up the snap to kind of legitimize like, hey, almost half the population, I believe half the population of the earth was snapped away and they've come back. Are they all dead? And so anyway, it was a neat little twist. We learn who kills Bailey Briggs at the end, and he ends up accusing his girlfriend. They really do spend a lot of time on like legalese. Like it's not like so dense that it's impenetrable by the average person. Right. It is a comic book for like 10-year-olds. But I love the fact that they played around with, can a dead person testify? What is the legal? Because again, in your normal everyday life, you're not worrying about what is the legal definition of dead. Right.
Especially because most of us aren't dealing with ghosts or or AI robots running amok or magic or time travelers. At least I'm not. I can't speak for the rest of you, but or mutants for that matter. But in this world where this is an everyday occurrence where magic, future technology, and time travel all exist in the same place, and it is common as the rain. They have to sit there and talk about, and that's the thing. It was like when AI first became a thing in the world, or I'll go back even further, when cloning, they were successfully able to clone animals, and like Congress tripped over themselves to write laws about what you could do with cloning so that we didn't have, like multiple man issues.
Right.
Like they was like a special session of Congress to deal with this, because they did not want suddenly there to be no laws and people just cloning whatever the fuck and in science running amok. Same thing with like AI. Like one of the things about the writers and actors strike from last year was we have technology now that can replicate people and create art. And the entire entertainment industry went, no, the fuck you don't. You're not putting me out of work. You're not this little black duck. And that was what the whole like fight was over, was, trying to create definitions and legal precedences for this new technology. And so one of the things the She-Hulk book does is it deals with that. It's like, okay, well, we know there are ghosts. We know ghosts can communicate with us. There's a wizard kind of tangentially working for this. Like Doctor Strange. Tangentially working for this law firm. This is a thing that exists. We have to actually deal with it now.
Yeah,
like that's really that's cool stuff to me. Like I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if every neckbeard who reads comics thinks it's cool, but I do. I like that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's fun to watch them take kind of like this real world approach to this fictional world. Like, okay, has to be some type of legal entity and law here. How do we handle that?
I've been saying for the longest time that when you break the fantasy, people's investment in the fantasy goes away and they go on to something else. Which is why a lot of these IPs are losing money and they're not able to successfully produce stuff people want to buy. This contributes to the fantasy because this now feels like a real world that I can invest myself in. Like, I'm going to go ahead and say, because you're going to ask me at the very end, and I'll double down on this at the time, but I'm going to say right now, this is one of the best books I've read in a while.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I love this. I absolutely, I mean, like, was everything like awesome about it? It was like quite the page turner. No, but I think in terms of the level of writing and my interest levels and making me feel like I escaped to a different world that felt lived in and real and 4-dimensional, most successful book I've read.
Oh, that's great to hear. That's awesome.
Yeah, for the once I'm not going to complain about something.
Well, yeah, I mean, your record
mark the date, everyone.
your record with Dan Slott's 50-50 then. I mean, I can't think of anything else we've covered with Dan Slott, but the previous one you weren't too impressed with, but now this I think is coming before that, which is interesting. So yeah. But anyway, as far as getting into issue 4 is the Spider-Man appearance. So Spider-Man shows up. He is suing Jameson, I think, for libel.
Yep.
Which is great. And then things go south when they find out that I think it's Pug like shows up and serves Peter Parker. Ditto serves Peter Parker a subpoena to show up at the trial. And then at the trial, Pug's like, I'm bringing you into this suit. I'm suing you as well. And so Spider-Man shows up and he's like, I think I'm going to drop the case now, which is hilarious. I thought that was pretty funny.
Spider-Man pouting as they're settling the case that J. Jonah Jameson has to stand in a chicken suit and issue apologies.
Yes.
But he can't get any money. Yeah, just to make people understand that. So Pug's whole thing is Peter Parker's pictures contributed to the libel that Spider-Man was a menace to the city. If you don't have the pictures, you don't have the contributing art to go with the headlines.
Right.
Spider-Man's a menace. That's what the whole lawsuit is. They're suing J. Jonah Jameson and the Daily Bugle, saying your paper has continually libeled my client, saying he's a menace to this city, when there's nothing but evidence saying he has helped the city one day after another. These are out and out lies. And Peter Parker contributed to that. Oh, wait a minute. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He's now suing himself.
Which is so good.
Right. So he can't contribute with the suit, and he basically has to settle for no money. But he's like, at least issue an apology, and so they do, and it's a stupid thing with J. Jonah Jameson in a chicken suit.
Yeah. Issue 5 introduces us to Southpaw, Holloway's granddaughter. Holloway wants, I think, Southpaw in his custody. Now this sets up because she was at the big house, which they call it the big house, but basically what they do is they take PIM particles and shrink all these villains down to like ant size, and that way they can house them in one big facility that's really, really tiny.
Right.
But
his legal argument is, and this is very true actually. So as I mentioned before, I work for a correctional institution. Juveniles are at this correctional institution. You cannot put a juvenile and an adult prisoner in the same room at all. When they're in booking, actually, they have to be segregated. They have to be walked through the process. They have to be escorted through the entire process with a deputy. The deputy cannot leave them alone. They cannot sit by themselves. And when they are done with that process, they have to be put in a holding cell. When they actually get to the main jail, they have their own unit. They are not allowed to be there. And if they have to come into like the clinic or anything, they have to either be with a deputy the entire time or they be entirely segregated. You cannot put juveniles in with adult prisoners. Period. The end.
The end.
Enter the situation with
Southpaw.
She's a 15-year-old girl, and her grandfather, who runs this law firm, is like, you can't put her in this prison. They have no facility set up for juveniles. They treat her like an adult, and he was like, you have no legal right to treat her as an adult. She's not an adult, and you can't hold her here. And so that's what he's bringing to court, that they have to move her to a different correctional facility. They have to let's just either release her on probation or put her with juveniles. And the problem is she's got this big ass fucking glove on that they can't get off of her. So there's no juvenile institution that'll hold her.
Right. So Holden basically gets her out of there, but there is also a prison break that happens that they end up the Mad Thinker, is that his name?
Yeah.
Talks to her before Holden shows up, and she's part of helping them escape, which entails them shrinking down to very, very, very minute size and going onto She-Hulk's hand and riding her arm all the way out of away from the facility. So then we hit issue 6, which kind of resolves the breakout story. Awesome Andy, all he wants to do is watch a Mets game. That's all he wants to do.
Yankee game.
No, I think he likes the Mets, because I'm pretty sure that he drew the Mets logo on the chalkboard.
I thought that was okay, because I'm arguing with you because I thought that was the Yankees logo.
I could be wrong, but I remember the one guy's like, it figures you're a Mets fan. And,
okay.
And then, right. And there's a point where I had to check this twice, because there's a point where he goes back home and he rooms with Ditto. And Ditto's like, I recorded the game, Yankees, right? And Awesome Andy just bows his head. He just walks
You're right. I actually do remember that now. I stand corrected. You're right.
So anyway,
he's
Awesome
Mets
Andy.
Fan.
He's a Mets fan. He runs into Jack Black on the streets, which is pretty funny. Jack Black sitting there playing his guitar. Yes. Holloway wants Dr. Pym to return Southpaw back to her regular size. There's an elaborate plan for the villains that end up escaping. They escape, but so they're wee tiny on her hand, and then they start to get embiggened. And at one point, they're action figure, not doll size, they're action figure size, and they're causing some trouble. The Mad Thinker tries to get awesome android to kind of go back to his evil ways, and I love the fact that he thinks things through, and you could see like awesome android thinking about his life with the people at the firm versus what his life was like with the Mad Thinker.
Yeah, he's appreciated and valued with the firm.
Right.
He's treated as a person.
So much so he just punches the Mad Thinker, and then the Mad Thinker's head promptly comes off. And it turns out he's an android himself. And then Southpaw ends up helping save her grandfather from the UFOs, which was some of those prisoners that had escaped. And that's kind of where we end issue 6. So we're able to send everybody back to prison. They're able to resolve all that. Southpaw is now under the care, under the guidance, I believe. I don't know if that happens in this issue or the next, but as a condition of her release, she has to live and shadow She-Hulk. There you go. And there we go. There's the first 6 issues of She-Hulk by Dan Slott. So, okay. What are you thinking of these first 6 issues, man?
I love them.
Anything else you haven't said?
Well, I'll just say this. I wish when they announced the She-Hulk show, I think, and they was like it was going to lean heavily on the Dan Slott stuff. Everyone thought we were going to get this. That every episode there would be some like crazy legal thing that She-Hulk was dealing with, and that there was going to be a lot of like playing around with superhuman law. The show kind of strays away from that. There's just some of it. Just a couple of weirdo court cases, one involving Daredevil. But the show, I think, towards the end strayed away from it, and then they were trying to do some other stuff with it, and it's not as good as it could have been, to say the least. But I love this. I love that there's so many different interesting interpretations of treating this world like it's real and what the implications of a world filling up with superheroes looks like and feels like, and how do you deal with that with everyday stuff? How do you deal with that with the law? I like the fact that Dan Slott's asking deep questions. He's doing it in a very entertaining and silly way, but I would tell you that I wouldn't necessarily call the book a parody either. No. I think these are really solid stories, and I enjoyed the first 6 issues.
Yeah, I did want to mention one other character that gets introduced in issue 1, and that's Mallory Book. the face, I think
Yeah.
is what they call her, who is one of the lead attorneys
The
before
face
Jen.
that wins the case, baby.
There it is, the face that wins the case. So she's like one of the lead attorneys, and she's, obviously a thorn in Jen's side there at the beginning of things, but now they're
She's threatened by her.
partners.
Yeah. Look, as we all know, women of equal stature and value don't like each other. Women not into competing with one another.
No.
And so she's she's the cock of the walk, the talk of the town, and in walks this bitch. She's the new flavor of the bunch. She's like, fuck this lady.
Not a fan.
No.
Well, yeah. As for myself, I really enjoyed these first 6 issues. Had a good time reading them. I loved the world that we were getting into, and just kind of like you were saying, I like seeing that real world kind of thought process being placed into this fictional world and see how things turn out.
Yeah.
So I had a good time. All right. Well, there's nothing else left to be said about that. We can go ahead and move right on to issues 7 through 12. Let me pull up the notes here. All right. Issues 7 through 12. So I said I was going to pull up the notes, and I did not pull up the notes.
God damn it, Starcher.
Yeah. Here we go. All right. So issue 7. Oh boy, things are going to be changing here. We're going to get ourselves a boxing match.
Oh, the times they are changing.
The champion of the universe is taking on everybody, and is the name of the Scar Door. What is the name of this place? Something. Anyways, he is boxing everybody to, I guess, rule this planet. First person's Beta Ray Bill. Then Gladiator shows up.
Stop again. You have to explain why. So on this planet, their legal system is like a might makes right, and essentially cases are decided. Legal precedent is decided by a fist fight.
Oh yes.
And so he is trying to take over this planet, and basically it's his right to do so in a fist fight. That if he wins a fist fight, if he wins a boxing match, he becomes king. He loses, he has to go away. And oh, by the way, and this is important to note because it comes up later, he is in possession of an infinity stone that is possessed of the primordial power. Yes,
the power gem. So he is able to take on any and all comers. And I think he even says like he'll just take on anybody. Anytime anybody wants to challenge me, okay, I'm right here. Come on. So Beta Ray Bill, Gladiator shows up. Gladiator, being a pretty powerful dude, ends up getting his butt whooped. Adam Warlock and Gamora are in the, on the side trying to figure out, okay, who's next? Well, Adam Warlock gets into the ring. Things are bad because...
Okay. So it's important to say that the setup to this is that the Living Tribunal has summoned Jennifer Walters to be a magistrate in the Cosmic Court.
That's correct. That is correct.
That's how she gets involved. And they get her specifically because not only is she a superhero, but she's also a lawyer. So she has sort of an intimate understanding of how stuff in the cosmos works.
Right. The Magistrati is the name of the group that come to get She-Hulk, place her in the order for working for the ultimate judge, the Living Tribunal. And they put her in place, and she has some crazy cases that she becomes a judge of right off the bat. One of which...
Oh, my God. Just cut it in half.
They're like, oh, yeah, let's do that. And they cut this kid. So these two aliens are fighting over the custody of this child.
They're fighting over what religion to bring it up under.
So then Jen's like, oh, I've got a way of, and she quotes the Bible, which is, they said, cut the kid in half. And
wait, she's being sarcastic at the time.
And she's being very sarcastic. And then all of a sudden this blade comes down, cuts the kid in half. And then we find out that, well, that's okay for their species because the kids just are fine after that. They grow into, now they got 2 kids. Okay. So you're fine with that. Then we have this crazy case where one race crashed onto a planet of some really sped up aliens, and these other ones are like the guy that has turtleitis from Night Court. It's hilarious because all of a sudden the case lasts about 20 minutes before this really sped up race has evolved so much that they don't care anymore and they leave. They're like, okay, well, we're out of here. Right. Which is hilarious. And then we have the Watchers, I think, who are getting sued, or at least they're getting.
Yeah, the Watchers are getting sued. So there's this alien race that they are isolated. It's like China. They are isolationist. They're isolated, and they don't feel like this is so funny. It's such a modern thing. We shouldn't have to be watched. We're not doing anything. Okay, but we're the Watchers. We watch everything. Well, who asked you to watch us? We're not bothering anyone.
Mhm.
And so they're suing the Watchers. And that's the thing is the Watchers also record everything. And so their whole thing is to stay hidden from the rest of the universe. They're the ultimate isolationists. And if the Watchers know of their history and are recording it, then it's information that other people can
Other
access.
people can get it. Right.
Now people will find them, and they're like, "This is no good." So the way that they settle it is basically the Watchers continue to watch, but they can't record it.
Yeah, like he is allowed to watch, but they like remove his mouth so he can't say anything. Which I don't know if at the end of that case, his mouth just goes away. And so he's allowed to watch. So he's fulfilling his duty. He's just not allowed to say anything about what happens.
Yep.
So, but at the end of issue 7, that's when She-Hulk is sent to Skarden to fight the champion of the universe.
Now, it is important to note that these are boxing matches in which you cannot use weapons.
Correct.
And so the first time, so this is great. So the first time She-Hulk gets her ass beat, right?
Yeah,
Which
she gets
everyone
whooped.
said she would have because, like, Drax, Gladiator, Adam Warlock, the Silver Surfer, all in traction. They're like, well, she's not stronger than any of
the
them.
Silver Surfer's laying there. Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, She-Hulk, you have no idea what you're getting
his
into.
board had his board was wrapped with boards on it. So anyway, so this guy Skandar Akbar, whatever the fuck his name is,
yeah, that's the guy.
beats the fuck out of her, and I think one of the other members of the Living Tribunal, one of the other magistrates, is like, we can't allow this to continue. He's going to kill you.
Yeah,
And so She-Hulk's like, and so this is really funny. They're like, we're ending this now. He wins. We are calling the match for you on your behalf. You're going to die, and we don't want this. We don't want.
Would you like to appeal?
Well, that's what she objects. She goes, no. I want to fight to the death. And they're like, would you like to file an appeal? And Jen, in a moment of brilliance, I would love to file an appeal.
Yes, please.
Yes, I would.
I was born.
And
for
that
this.
gives her 3 months to prepare a case. Where over the 3 months, she initially her plan is, I will train as Jen Walters, and I will lift weights, and I will train and get muscular, because then when I turn back into She-Hulk, I'll be exponentially stronger than I am now, because her human self becomes exponentially stronger as She-Hulk. So if her human self becomes that much stronger, it becomes like a factor of 10. Then now She-Hulk is now stronger by a factor of 10.
Right.
That's the gimmick. However, she's like, oh, I don't even need this anymore. I know how I'm going to beat him. And she was like, what I realize is that you're not allowed to have weapons in this fight. And she legally argues that the possession of the Infinity Stone is a weapon, and it's unfair. And so he has to take the Infinity Stone out, and then she beats the fuck out of him.
She beats him up. That is yes.
Yeah.
That is the end of issue 8. And then we get into issue 9. Issue 9, she's I believe back on Earth, or just coming back. We open up the issue with Hercules, who is fighting the Constrictor and continues.
Oh, this is great. This was one of my favorite bits.
He hurts the Constrictor in a big battle, and the Constrictor decides he's going to sue Hercules. So Hercules just cannot stop himself from like hurting Constrictor accidentally, on purpose, just over and over, and actually continues to brag about it.
He beats him. He beats him without controlling himself, and then he's happy with what he's done.
Right.
And I love it when they're actually like when they're having a meeting about it, and he's just like, but he was doing bad things, and I just smote him. like, well, you can't, and it's a police brutality case. If it's one of the things that got argued in, I think, like Civil War, or I can't remember which movie it was, but they talked about the Avengers as a police force. That if you're going to treat them as a police force, then they have to act like a police force, and they have to be held accountable for damage that they cause. And so if we're treating Hercules like a cop, or a deputy, you can't use excessive force. Basically, once the criminal has been detained, that's it. You can't fucking hit him again. You also can't you can't. The Rodney King case was interesting because if you listen to the cops, their argument is he wouldn't stay down. They were beating him with batons because he would not stop. The defense of that was you were beating him with batons. There was like 8 of you. You had to stop.
Right.
And therein lie. Now, they were found not guilty, and that's a whole other story. But therein lies the rub. So now you have Hercules, who's a demigod, and he's beaten this guy without stopping. And he's thrilled with with what he's done here. And they're like, you can't do that legally. If you're acting in the role of law enforcement, once he was subdued, you had to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was fast forwarding here to through issue 9 just to find the song that Hercules sang, because that's one of the that's
Let's head to Stuno.ai.
That is one of the bits of evidence that they bring into the court, is how he just goes off to a bar, and I think he starts a song about how he beat the constrictor's face in. So anyway, the She-Hulk comes back, and of course all this craziness is going on, but not really. The big thing is She-Hulk is like really super duper strong, where she's not realizing what her own strength can do. Yeah. She ends up getting involved with Reed. She calls Reed Richards. She's like, I need some help. Doc Samson gets involved a little bit as well. She gets the Jupiter suit, which is to help, I guess, like control her strength in some way.
Yeah, it's a modulator.
Right. And there's a brief moment where Titania shows up and is going to attack She-Hulk, and She-Hulk backhands her essentially 8 blocks into the air. And that's kind of the end of like Titania, who's all upset for a quick second. And then she hits, and that's the end of her for the issue.
Yeah.
But not the end of Titania for the series. But my notes are here. Hercules just cannot help himself throughout this whole thing, to where finally Jen Walters comes in and says, just settle.
Right.
It's okay.
Because his lawyer, was it
Mallory.
She's like, we have a case. We can absolutely get this thrown out.
Right.
We can win this for our client. And Jen, in a sudden bout of ethics, is like, no, do the right thing. You fucking beat the fuck out of this guy unnecessarily. Go give him his money. And Mallory's like, who the fuck asked you?
Right.
I had mark it on your bingo card. I had a moment from The Wire.
Uh-oh.
Where in the final season, I think it is, where they have Omar on the stick up.
Yeah.
On ugly face Andre's beating, and they're like, we have him dead to rights. It's fine. And and of course, Omar reaches out to Bunk, and Bunk is like, if we don't have you on this one, we have you. Then we have you on so many others that we never actually had you on. So it all comes out in the wash. He was like, that's true, but then you're letting the person who actually did this go scot-free. So Bunk goes back, and he gets with, I can't remember the name of the detective. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this anecdote. But he was just like, look into this again. And the whole thing comes apart. And the other detective is like, I am going to be in all your shit from now on. I am going to disrupt every single one of your cases. And Landsman still has the best line. He's just like, how could you let him do this to you? It was that level. It was that kind of a thing of like, what business do you have coming in here, messing with my case, messing with my client? Like, get the fuck out of here. But Hercules listens to his Avengers teammate.
Yeah,
like, how frustrating that must have been for Mallory.
Right. 'Twas a chilly autumn morn as I ambled through the leaves, and by chance I came upon the constrictor's band of thieves. I smote his 2 companions, but was trapped in his embrace. So with my godly might, I pulled back my trusty mace, and then I struck him. I struck him in the face. And his nose did break, and his eyes swelled tight, and his lips did burst, and his teeth gave flight. And the
So-
skull of yon base felon, like an o'er-ripened melon, did split itself upon the ground and stain the sod and stone bright red, for I had struck him in the head. A catchy ditty.
Imagine again the Rodney King thing, and the cops are just like, "We beat the fuck out of him, with our batons."
That's
Do,
horrible.
do, 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 do.
And they're all like, yeah, we came up with that on our own, right there on the
Right.
stand. They're just so happy about it. All right, so there you go. That
There was a case where I believe it was New York City police stuck a plunger up a guy's ass.
Are you kidding?
Could you imagine? Like, and then they sang a song about it.
Oh my gosh.
Sticking a plunger in your ass, do. Well, I don't know what we're doing tonight. I got a feeling that something ain't right.
Oh my gosh,
Where?
that's horrible.
Sticking a plunger in your ass.
No. Don't get Suno on that one, please. Okay.
Can I tell you how often I play poop in a bag now for my kids?
Do you
Constantly. Poop in a bag.
I love that. My daughter would love that actually.
Mm.
My daughter says she's taken a class and something came up and she was like, yeah, my dad loves the AI music. And they're like, what is that? Does it sound good? I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, you need to immediately pull out Poop in a Bag and play it for these people. Don't think that would get her too many friends. But anyway, all right. So we got issue 10 to go. We get a history of Titania here in issue 10. Yeah, we get a nice little background of the kind of broken background for Titania, Skeeter, if you will. She makes friends with Marcia, another person I think it's at her school. She makes friends with Marcia at school. They remain friends for quite a while. And in order to kind of be noticed, this is another discussion, another commentary on identity. She makes up a lie about how she was Spider-Woman, and Marcia goes around and tells this hoity-toity elite person that they all, one of the mean girls that they look up to, that I can't remember her name, Skeeter, but she's actually Spider-Woman. And so they get invited to this party, and in the middle of this party, all of a sudden Secret Wars happens, and
Right.
they are in Montana, I think is where it's at. I can't remember.
I think it's like Idaho.
Or Colorado or something like that. But yeah, they end up
No, sorry. Yeah. It's Denver. It's somewhere in Denver.
Okay, so they take a big section of the Earth and they ends up getting transported into the whole Secret Wars thing, Battle World, and that's where they run into Doctor Doom. So it's Marcia and Skeeter run into Doctor Doom, and Doctor Doom's like, "Hey, I identify with you guys. Want a little bit of power?" And he proceeds to change Marcia into Volcana, I think is her name, and then Titania becomes Titania. So we get to learn a little bit about her origin story, how she wished for a hero's life, lies about being
She
Spider-Woman.
immediately turns to the Tommy Dreamer who can never win the big one.
Yep, that was my next note. She could never beat She-Hulk, and not only that, she just kept getting her butt handed to her by other superheroes.
Right.
But she becomes obsessed. She continually loses, and she becomes obsessed with She-Hulk. And by the end of this, okay, we start out this issue. There's this guy in an astronaut suit that approaches the Watcher, which it's the cousin of Uatu. I can't remember his name. I think it might be Zaymod or whatever the heck his name was. But anyway, you don't know who this is. And the Watcher's like, I can't interfere. And the guy's like, I need to find somebody that really hates She-Hulk. And the Watcher's like, oh, She-Hulk. Yeah, I can help you out with that one, because earlier in the couple issues before, the Watcher's got a little pissed at her. But anyway, we find out at the end, the person in this suit is, sure enough, it's the champion of the universe, Tyrus Slatteris or whatever his name is. And he Skandor Akbar shows up and gives Titania the power gem. Yep. And then we're into issue 11. So at the beginning of this issue, Champion is training Titania, and he wants her to go take revenge for him, pretty much. To which she lifts a large stone over her head to show how powerful she is, and training's going well. And then she proceeds to drop the stone right on the top of the champion of the universe's head, and then takes off to go find Jen Walters, She-Hulk, and teach her a lesson. Meanwhile, at the Excelsior, which I think is the apartments, Doc Samson shows up, and they decide, he finds Jen. He's like, hey, you want to go for a walk? So they take off walking, and they're talking about, we learn about Jen having the issues about transforming from She-Hulk or into She-Hulk, or She-Hulk back to Jen. We learn a little bit about Bone, Idaho, which I didn't know anything about going into this. I don't know if you did, but we learned a little bit.
I mean, like, I remember all the stuff that leads up to Planet Hulk, where he destroyed Las Vegas. Like some of the stuff they reference, like, it was funny to see Scarlet Witch back so soon, because the way this reads, this doesn't take place too long after Avengers Disassembled, which is the one, I believe, where she thinks that her twins are born, and then her twins allegedly die, and she goes crazy and she kills Hawkeye, like all kinds of. Do you remember that?
I kept thinking of House of M, but I know that's not what they're referring to. So
no, House of M was a whole different thing.
Yeah, I think she ends up going crazy because she realizes that her kids are not real.
Yeah, well, if you remember, we did Avengers Disassembled, and the whole thing was she kept creating different, like, crazy illusions. Like, she kept creating situations where they think various villains are attacking Avengers Mansion, and they're not. And this, all
right.
Yeah, this ends with a couple of Avengers getting killed, not the least of which was Hawkeye, which is going to come up later.
Right.
So, like, I didn't realize the Scarlet Witch was back so soon, and in the good graces of the Avengers.
Yeah. So by walking through this, essentially Titania shows up at the Excelsior and busts in looking for She-Hulk, and sure enough, she's not there. But Titania, just destroys the apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Ditto ends up saying, "Oh, she's probably at Timely Plaza," so she's like, "Okay, well, I'm going to head there." And Titania ends up attacking the law firm at Timely Plaza, looking for Jen, and Jen is not there yet. Ends up throwing like a van through like this, I don't know, 10th level floor or something like that. It ends up burying Mallory Book under some wreckage. Meanwhile, Holden is trying to scramble to get everybody out of the building, because the building's under attack. And Titania, she is mad with power. There's a supposedly impenetrable force field that's outside of this thing. They immediately activate it.
Digs into it.
Yeah, she's hard. Like just starts ripping it apart, and she is going in. So finally, She-Hulk ends up facing off with Titania, and there's a battle, and She-Hulk gets the worst of it. She ends up getting her butt handed to her.
She ends up tricking Titania, because the power gem goes to somebody who, the power gem will stay with the person who long enough for them to do what they need to do with the power gem, and then it goes away, is how it was explained, something along those lines. So they essentially use, what's the shapeshifter's name again?
Ditto.
They use Ditto to make it look like Titania killed She-Hulk. So at that point, Jen is able to take the gem from Titania, having completed the mission, according to
okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's sort of how that goes down.
So then Jen hits Titania into Mars.
Yeah. By the end of issue 11, it looks like she's about to drop something, and they turn around and find out that Titania sees Jen Walters, or actually doesn't see anything laying there, but we see that she's transformed back into Jen Walters. And then we find out at the beginning of issue 12 that Titania can't see her because she wants to hurt She-Hulk. She can't see Jen Walters at all. You got to go back
to the first issue with Scarlet Witch. We said, because one of the whole thing with them saying you have to be Jen Walters all the time is one of the reasons why she wants to be She-Hulk is her enemy, her identity is public, and being being She-Hulk is essentially, it's like walking around with a suit of armor. She's protected. If she's Jen, she's vulnerable to attacks. So then Scarlet Witch goes, fine, when you're in your Jen form. So he goes, I'll love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. She puts a spell on her, and she's like, now, no, anyone that sees you in your Jen Walters form that wants to do you harm will not be able to see you at all.
Right. So Titania's about to drop this huge boulder on her, and she can't find her. So that gives Doc Samson time enough to come in and basically, hold her off. And while Jen goes to figure out, okay, how do we get the power gem off of her? And I don't want to skip the part about how they go to a comic book store.
Oh, have at it, Jesse. This was good stuff, but have at it.
I mean, they go to a comic book store. She finds Stu Cicero, which is the guy that's always in charge of the archives. And she's like, hey, I need some help. We need to figure out how to get this power gem off of Titania. And he's like, well, I can't help you here because there's no archives down here anymore. We just got destroyed. And they're like, okay, well, let's head to a comic book store. So they go to the comic book store and they run into your comic book nerds hanging out on a Wednesday, discussing continuity, discussing all sorts of fun stuff us comic book nerds like to talk about. And there are some great moments. There's one point where they're like trying to figure out how to do this, but they can't stop bickering with each other. Right. And Stu is finally like, look, you guys need to help instead of argue about this. And he goes, you know what happened back in the day when we found something that didn't fit with continuity? We got this. And he pulls out a postcard that says no prize on it, which is brilliant. That's what you used to get. They would send you a thing that said you got no prize for figuring and for pointing this out. And your thing got published. So it's a great little piece of meta. Go ahead.
I got to talk about the show again. So the finale of the show is them basically doing like a meta commentary on the modern fan. But the She-Hulk show, the problem with it was it hates the fans.
Yeah.
Which is not a great starting point.
No, not when you want people to like your show.
This was yet example number 567 over the last 10 years of we don't want the current fans. We want new fans. We want different fans. In the case of She-Hulk, we want girls who don't read comic books to like this show and go read comic books. But we want them to read our comic book. Go read Ms. Marvel. And here's the thing is that's not how this works. You write stuff that the fans will like. The fans will then tell the people around them, and then you'll get some of those people to come over. It doesn't work any other way. It never has. It never will. So here you have the people who are producing the She-Hulk show, and they hate the fans. They hate them with so much passion. They don't want them to watch the show, and therefore nobody watched the show. They missed both audiences. What the She-Hulk comic did in this particular instance is it also commented on fandoms and the problems with fans and the things that fans do that make creators have a difficult time wanting to continue doing this, but did so in a way that respects those fans.
Right.
The She-Hulk comic does not hate its fans.
Yeah.
It recognizes that the fans can be problematic, but problematic is not I hate you. Right.
Exactly.
The She-Hulk show hated its fans. That's the difference.
Well, and sometimes, when you're taking those jabs, just kind of like you were saying, when you're taking those jabs at those people, the other half of the audience that has no idea who or what they're taking jabs at is confused.
Yeah.
And they have no idea what are you trying to say here? Because I don't get it.
Yeah. So, when at the end of She-Hulk, when she like climbs out of the show and, and she's like climbing through the Disney Plus menu and she finds the AI or whatever. And it's like a whole meta commentary on the creation of these shows. Like I got it. And I kind of thought it was funny, but I could absolutely see a lot of people who have who are not immersed in comic book stuff.
Right.
Being really confused. First of all, being confused that she was able to break the fourth wall that way and then do what she was doing. I remember talking to people who watched the She-Hulk show, like Melissa, for example. I think I watched it with her. And she didn't, and I mean, I kind of told her some stuff, but I remember her watching the finale going, I don't understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Why is any of this why is she able to do that?
Yeah. I do want to talk about the most shocking moment. I'm just bringing this up because it's in my notes, but the most shocking moment of this whole series happens during the battle with Doc Samson and Titania. And that's when awesome Andy gets his head punched off his shoulders. And I was really sad about that. Like, he's the one guy that I'm like rooting for throughout this whole series. And he shows up, he's there to try and help out. And then Titania just punches him and his head comes off. And I mean, it's important enough for Holden Holloway to like stop Reed Richards, who all these other heroes have showed up now to try and take out Titania. And he stops Reed Richards. He's like, no, before you go and do that, you need to fix this robot, which I thought was great because he was the heart and soul of what was going on.
And I like how Reed Richards was like very like self-righteous and adamant about joining the battle, and then like Holloway like argued with him, and Reed was like, "Oh, well, why didn't you just say so in the first place?" Oh yeah, I'll fix your robot now, no problem.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. You talked about how Jen gets a hold of the power gem and then promptly hits Titania into Uranus.
Uranus.
Then by the end of the issue, we are. I have a feeling that they knew that the 2005 series was going to happen because there's some talk about 8 months. So they, this must have been in the works for sure. They knew they were going to be coming back. But we get a little bit of an epilogue. The epilogue, Southpaw's on the run with the Mad Thinker head. She's escaped. She's running off. Titania calls Jen for representation, not knowing what in the world she's doing there. Mallory is recovering, so she lived, but she's in the hospital.
And we find out that she will not be using her legs anytime soon.
Right. And then Holloway and Jen look to rebuild Timely Plaza, but that's hey,
and Hercules is working for damage control, which was totes adorbs.
yes it was. But all right, so I mean, as far as these 12 issues go, rounding out these last 6, we have a lot of we have a pretty good solid story here. Titania showing up, which is one of the villains that we were expecting. She-Hulk's got a tussle with, which was pretty good. All handled well. I had a good time. Anything else you'd like to say about these last 6?
No, because I know we're trying to keep it moving here. I love these first 12 issues. The 2004 Dan Slott She-Hulk are darn near perfect. Jesse has been doing this with me long enough that if I really had any harsh criticisms, I would be happy to tell you about them. but I like Jen Walters' characterization. I like the duality. I like the way the other characters are used. I love the legalese. I think the book is humorous without being without taking the piss necessarily out of it. Like it's funny without being what's the word I'm looking for? Not slapstick. It's funny without being slapstick. It's funny without doing like gross out humor. I really think it hit the right tone for what they were trying to go for, and without having gone back and read a lot of the John Byrne stuff or whatever, I think this is probably the model for any kind of She-Hulk show or book.
Okay. Before I move on to the last 5 issues that we're going to be talking about, I need to throw this in here. Creative team for issues 7 and 8. Dan Slott writing, penciler Juan Bobbio, inked by Marcelo Sosa, lettered by David Sharp, colored by Dan Kemp, and then issues 9 through 12. Same writer, obviously, Dan Slott, penciled by Paul Pelletier. Inker was Rick Magyar, lettered by David Sharp, colored by Dan Kemp. And then, as we get into our final 5 issues here, this is going to be the first 5 of the continued, well, let's say continued, but this series actually ran for a good bit, but it's going to be the first 5 issues of the 2005 run. Our creative team on issues 1 through 3, very familiar names here. Dan Slott writing, penciled by Juan Bobbio, inked by Marcelo Sosa, lettered by David Sharp, colored by Dan Kemp. Issue 4, the only thing that changes, our artist becomes Scott Collins and colored by Wilfredo Quintana. In issue 5, we're back to Juan Bobbio on pencils, Marcelo Sosa on on the inks, and then Dan Kemp back on color. So basically the same creative team as issues 1 through 3. All right, here we go. Issues 1 through 5. So our first issue, Jen is back at the reconstructed Timely Plaza, but now it's under the control, or I should say direction, of a guy by the name of Arthur Zix, who was put in charge by Holden Holloway, as he is basically on a he's looking for Southpaw. He's off looking for Southpaw. So our first case, Charles Zarkowski, who was caught on film shooting a man, but he claims that it was a man sent from the future to kill him. Oh boy. Let's get my hand rubbing right now. Yeah.
Oh, Jesse took his pants off to read this story.
Woo-wee. Mallory book is back, but yes, she is in a wheelchair.
Jesse read this book with no pants on and a can of cranberry sauce.
Just gently placed right there. Where's the cranberry sauce at?
Is Jesse reading a time travel book? Dad, are you reading about time travel? I brought you the cranberry sauce.
Just set it up there with the other 10 jars. Mallory book is back, but she's in a wheelchair. The firm is now representing supervillains. Turns out that's a little bit more lucrative. Jen meets up with Doc Samson again. He tries to make her understand that her recent adventures that resulted in the devastation were not her fault. The TVA, the Time Variance Authority, is now involved because we've got a time travel case on our hands here, and they want to make sure things are in order. So in order to do that, they have brought people in from prior to the incident occurring. So what do they call this, Mark, where you want to get the right jury?
Yeah. So to go back, there's a video of
picture.
Well, there was also a video, I thought.
Was there a video? Okay.
Yeah. Because if you'll remember, when they finally show it to you later on, there's a kid's filming it with his cell phone.
Oh, I thought he was just taking a picture. He's like, "Hey, can I shoot you?" And then takes a picture of him. But anyway, go ahead.
It doesn't matter. In any case, let's go with video for the.
It's on film, right?
So, one of the things they talked about is they have been showing this video wall to wall on the news. There's no possible way anyone living in the Manhattan area hasn't seen this video at this point.
And Zarkowski is a very, very prominent individual. He's the 9th richest man in the world.
Yeah. So you have to create a jury of your peers that doesn't have knowledge of the case. They can't come in with any kind of prejudices. And the argument is, well, there's no way they can create a jury. Everyone in New York has seen this fucking thing.
Right.
So the argument is, what if we go back in time and grab jury members that before the incident ever happened?
Smart.
Sure. And so one of the people that they grab is Clint Barton, Hawkeye, who was dead, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
Who I believe died during Avengers Disassembled, if I got my events right. In any case, they figure out about midway through this that everybody who's on the jury died a year ago.
Yeah, all at the same time, if I remember correctly.
Because they don't want to create paradoxes.
Right. And
that's a big deal with the Time Variance Authority, is making sure that if you're going to mess with time, you don't do so in a way that creates paradoxes. That's where having to prune timelines and erase people comes into play. And
Jen, in her infinite wisdom, decides that she's going to try and save Hawkeye.
Yeah.
By
the way, did you fucking just fucking spray across the room when she was like, "That's a Doc Brown letter"?
Save the clock tower.
When I heard her reference the Doc Brown letter, I laughed out loud.
Oh yeah, it was great. Yeah, Jen's idea of so she's like, I'm going to save Hawkeye. I need to figure out a way to save him in some way. Pug, by the way, she's decided to run this past Pug. Pug is like, do you have any idea what you're doing? Number one, you're going up against the TVA. You could get disbarred. This whole case could get thrown out. What in the world are you thinking?
Yeah, I didn't love this. I didn't love her single-minded pursuit to save Hawkeye to the exclusion of all else, including her career. I'll tell you, the first 12 of this were solid. This kind of lost me.
Okay.
This seemed out of character. This seems out of character for Jen. Like they had to make her kind of an impulsive idiot in order to have this story.
Well, you got to think this is her teammate. This is a person that saved lives in the past. They've run.
A lot of people have died on the Avengers.
Okay, all right, and I think that's probably Pug's argument too, especially when he points out, like, "Hey, oh yeah, by the way, everybody is going to die on that same day."
You're only going to save Hawkeye? And that's kind of one of the thematic threads throughout this entire run is, as a superhero, what are your obligations? You know, are you obligated to only save some people? Do you save everybody? At what cost? You know, there's a lot of questions about what is the role, what is the nature of superheroing. And that's the kind of, and that's his point to her is, what are you only gonna, like, how ethical is that you're only gonna save the one guy
Right.
because he matters to you? As if none of these people matter? Is that what you're saying? None of these people matter? And she's like,
Yeah.
and her answer is, they don't. Only Clint matters.
Yep.
And it was like, okay, that is, you are cutting off your nose to spite your face.
And she follows through with that too. I mean,
Yeah.
So I mean, at the beginning of issue 2, it gets funny because Clint has decided, well, you know, I don't care if I'm sequestered here. He goes out and starts heroing.
Everyone's reaction to him is so funny. Hey, aren't you dead? And like, but they never get to the dead part because
No.
are you? And I'm like, that's right, I'm Hawkeye.
Yeah, that's good stuff. But anyway, we get back at, you know, he comes back the next day and he's you know, being a faithful juror member. Zarkowski's case takes some weird turns as we get into issue 2. During the case, remember Jen trying to sign language everything, you know, just trying to get away with, like, okay, I know he's deaf.
Pug's line was like, or you're signaling to steal third.
She don't know what she's doing. Yeah, she don't know what she's doing. But anyway, she's trying to tell Clint, like, look, you are going to die, and this is how it's going to happen. And yeah, she comes with up with the Doc Brown note. And we find out that Zarkowski invented time travel, like the definitive time travel that will, you know, cause paradoxes and all this other crazy stuff, because time travel's been around before, but he definitely mentions in here that it isn't something with alternate timelines or anything like that. This is time travel. And that's one of the things, if you look at time travel as far as the Marvel Universe goes, and talking about like branching out into alternate realities, that's usually the way that they would go. But this guy is supposedly the guy that invented the actual thing. So anyway, boy, this case is going to be hard to explain.
Not really.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, let me try. And then you step in.
Oh,
all right.
Sorry.
Let me try. I think it's tough. It's tough to kind of explain this to somebody. So Zarkowski says, there is a time traveler that's coming to kill me. And I knew he was coming, and that's why I shot this guy in the back, because it was him.
Self-defense.
Yeah. He showed up. I knew it was him, and I shot him. So by the end of this, there's a big battle that happens in the courtroom. And just to kind of put this out here before I forget, the battle happens and the TVA is like, okay, we've got to send everybody back to their times right now. And that's just as Jen gets up there and hands Clint the letter, and half of it goes with him back to his time while she's holding the other half.
Yeah.
So she doesn't know if he's understanding anything that's in the letter or whatever. But anyway, they all get sent back. That's the end of the case. It's a mistrial, blah, blah, blah. Well, Zarkowski's run off, and he's used this thing called a time scrambler or something. I don't know, something the TVA has to change his looks and his appearance. And then as he looks, after this is done, he realizes that his face is the same face of the man that he shot. So he decides to sit down and I think record a video that gets sent to himself. And he's like, wait a second. He realizes what's about to happen, and he's not going to do any time travel whatsoever. So this doesn't happen. So he doesn't end up killing himself. And that's when the TVA comes up behind him, grabs him and says, too bad, you got to go, and promptly transports him back into the past to where he shoots himself. But he doesn't die. He's just in a coma, and he ends up waking up, and they end up later going like to him and like, okay, well, what can we get you on then? I mean, you tried to kill yourself. And
oh my God, that conversation is the best part of this. It's just like, well, we're going to get him for attempted murder, but the victim was himself. Therefore it's a suicide. We can't charge him. Then we'll charge him with insider trading. Again, he was sending information to himself. And this is the part that I thought was funny. They were like, time travel technology and research and development is expensive. So he was sending himself stock tips
to finance it. Right.
And that's it. It wasn't like this personally enrich himself. It was to continue to develop time travel devices.
Oh, it's beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah.
I had a good time. But by the end of the issue, the TVA wasn't stupid. They knew exactly what Jen was doing. They grab her and they say, okay, by the way, you're arrested. We're taking you for trial because if you're found guilty of these crimes, you are going to be erased from existence. All right. So then we get into issue 3, which is legacy numbering 100. So it's a big double-sized issue. I was talking to Mark earlier. There was 2 reprints in this issue. So She-Hulk's on trial at the TVA.
Yep.
And they bring her in.
This issue annoyed the piss out of me.
Okay. All right. Well, go ahead. Tell me why.
Okay, so She-Hulk, they catch She-Hulk trying to give Clint Barton the letter. So because that's illegal, you're not allowed to do stuff like that. You're not allowed to give somebody knowledge of their own death. That creates problems with timelines, yada yada yada. So their whole thing with her is you broke a pretty substantial law and you broke it pretty badly. So it's so bad you essentially get the death penalty. The death penalty for the Time Variance Authority is you were erased from the timeline from ever having existed. So the trial hinges on proving that her existence was important enough to preserve despite the infraction, and the prosecution has to prove that removing her from the timeline will have a negligible, if any, effect at all. Which means it's a stream of character witnesses jerking her off. This was not a well-written issue, because if the idea is to prove that without her certain events won't happen and those events are important, that isn't what they talked about. What they talked about was she's an awesome gal. Mm-hmm. And that drove me insane.
Well, okay, that was most of the trial, but the thing that nailed it, though, which, by the way, She-Hulk says, I need the best representation possible. I need it from my firm immediately. And we find out that they actually reach forward 30 years from her present to grab maybe it's 15, to grab Southpaw, who has grown up to be a tremendous and one of the best lawyers that they have. Yep. So she is representing She-Hulk here in this case.
That was good stuff. Like the inclusion of South, like my grandfather encouraged me to be a lawyer and blah, 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 but you encouraged me to be a better person, because when we meet Southpaw, so Southpaw is kind of like the Greek chorus in this whole thing. Like when she shows up, she's just, everything Jen does is bad. She keeps calling her like freak show and freak job or whatever the fuck she calls her, and it's just like every time Jen does something, she'll be like, yeah, but it's like my coworker with the records. Like, I only played it once. Yeah, but you ate off it twice. That kind of, just those kinds of comments. Because at one point, Jen even says, like, you can't let me have one, can you? It's like, nope, not even.
Right,
like,
right.
She's just a 15-year-old snotty girl. And then when we meet her again, she's grown up to become this lawyer, and she says that Jen, you inspired me to be a better person. So that was sweet. That stuff I liked.
Yeah, yeah. But as far as the trial goes, okay, first off, this is a big double-sized 100 issue. You've got to kind of bring in things to support why some of the just nods to previous stories and whatever. Yeah, whatever. But the thing that the thing that nails it down, though, is not the fact that everybody's talking about how nice she is. I mean, the one TVA agent's like, okay, let me tell you one thing. I want to take you into the future, and I want to show you you are responsible for something called the Reckoning War, which doesn't just affect the planet, it affects the universe. And she's like, okay, well, She-Hulk's like, I won't do it. I just won't do it. And they're like, you've already done it. It's already set in motion. This is going to happen. So it's something she's done in the past. And I have a feeling it's something to do with the Watchers. But anyway, what nails it home is like Southpaw's like, I've got it. Or maybe it was Pug that came up with the idea. But either way, they bring in everybody that she saved. And they all testify, which is what nails it. And they're like, okay, all right, well, that's fine.
Well, I think what they're saying is, by virtue of if you remove She-Hulk from the timeline, these people aren't saved.
Right.
And if they're not saved, it creates all these other problems.
Yeah.
That's why so again, to win, they have to prove that her existence is impactful on the timeline. And that's how they prove it.
Mm-hmm. And it's just not this trial here. We also have a villain that hitches a ride with the TVA by the name of Clockwise, who gets a hold of the Ret can and starts firing.
I laughed at too. I was like, haha. See what you did there.
Yeah, they erase the existence of Nightman and Dr. Rocket, who don't nobody has any idea who they are because sure enough, Clockwise erased them from existence. But anyway, yeah, at the end of this, they end up winning the case. She-Hulk is given a prisoner Avenger. So the TVA has all these time cells, and I don't know how, but their prison's full.
Mm-hmm.
So even the TVA has limitations.
Okay, I got to talk about that for 1 second. Because at one point they were, She-Hulk's like, but why are you coming down so hard on me? We're Avengers. We save people. And they're like, that's not what we're interested in here. We're interested in who affects the timeline. You Avengers are the fucking worst.
You are the worst. You guys are the worst.
Do you remember, because it was one of the times that we did it synergizing with one of the Marvel movies. Do you remember the storyline that we did where they collected, I think it was Avengers Through Time, and it was like 2 different versions of Hank Pym. And it was like
that's mentioned, I think, in here.
Yeah, and they mentioned that as an example of the Avengers are horrible about breaking time.
Like one of the
you're
TVA...
worse than Eddie Kang. You're absolutely the worst. And that's hilarious.
I swear, like one of the TVA agents has a wallet full of pictures of just all the worst stuff the Avengers have done to time.
Yeah,
and he pulls it out. He's like, this, and this, and this. Yeah. But anyway, so the prison's full. Time cells are full. And at the end of this, they're like, okay, we're going to let you go, but you are going to be responsible for one of these people that are in a time cell because we got to put Clockwise in there. And she's like, okay, well, I want the Avenger that I saw when I was first brought in here that you guys have a prisoner. And then we find out it's
Two Guns.
Two Gun Kid. That's right. The Two Gun Kid. Well, okay. Let's talk about the next issue, which is back to Bone, Idaho.
I have nothing to say about this. I sped red to get through it.
This is a focus on what traumatized her. I mean, this is the core of what She-Hulk's Jen Walters issues are throughout. I think most of what happens in the first series and this, where this is mentioned over and over, where she lost her stuff, killed I don't know if this happened in Bone, but she ends up killing the Vision. She ends up destroying this town. Everybody blames the Hulk, but She-Hulk was actually the one that was responsible for most of the devastation.
He said he took the blame.
He took the blame. So the point of issue 4 is before she's sent back home from the TVA, Mobius is like, well, what have you been doing for the 8 months that you were kind of gone? And that's what this issue is about. She goes back to Bone, Idaho as Jen Walters to try and help out and basically help the community rebuild from the devastation that happened there because she feels really responsible. She ends up solving a murder in the process. But by the end of it, I think she has it's helped her. It helped her kind of get through some of the stuff. She actually apologizes. She changes into her She-Hulk form, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, she's back again. But she apologizes for what happens because she realizes that the only way to move forward, this community can move forward and she can move forward, is if she accepts responsibility and tries to work with them for their forgiveness. And they do. They end up forgiving her. She becomes a big part of the community. And yeah, at the end of this issue is when we learned the Avenger she saved was the Two Gun Kid, because he's like, okay, we're sending you back now, and here's Two Gun. He's going with you. So I liked it. I thought it was a good focus, a good issue to kind of focus on what exactly she did to kind of try to recover from what happened in Bone. Then we finally get to issue 5. And this is just a fun romp with Two Gun Kid trying to acclimate to 2005. He shows up there. Awesome Andy's on a mission, and we find out that he's on a secret mission that's actually to help poor Mallory get back in. He's doing physiotherapy with Mallory. And poor Two Gun Kid. Let's try that again. Poor Awesome Andy having to sit there and watch. You know, he's just this big block-headed android, doesn't have a mouth. He can't say anything. The only way he could communicate was with a piece of chalk and a chalkboard hung around his neck. He has to sit there and watch Two Gun Kid make eyes at Mallory, and Mallory's just, she is so smitten with Two Gun Kid.
Oh yeah, she is. She definitely got the vapors.
But they decide, like, I think it's Jen's like, hey, let's go ahead. What did you used to be? Let's try and figure out something for you to do. And Two Gun Kid's like, well, yeah, I used to be a lawyer. And they're like, oh, great. Well, let's go ahead and put you into practicing law. And he's got to try and sit there and catch up on all this law. And it turns out by the end of things, that's not exactly what he's good at. What he's good at is rootin', tootin', and shooting. That's what I...
Yes, sirree, Bob.
Rootin', tootin', and shooting. So he finally, I think Mallory ends up talking to him like, hey, go ahead and pick up your weapons. We'll get you covered. And he ends up going out on the town and facing off with Bushwhacker. And he feels right at home then at that point. And then we find out Hawkeye left Two Gun Kid a DVD.
Mm-hmm.
The DVD's like, hey, just in case you're back, I'm doing this for everybody. Just in case you're back, why don't you, there's something for you at my storage unit. He goes down to the storage unit and there is this little air cycle. And they go off and it's She-Hulk and Two Gun Kid riding an air cycle. And that's the last panel. So again, I mean, it wasn't much, but just kind of a fun romp. I'm sure, like I said, this series goes on for quite a while. The 2005 series does.
Mm-hmm.
I found it interesting that we ended here on issue 5. I would have thought that.
I don't understand when they made the trade why they just didn't make it 1 through 12 and leave it at that.
Yeah, it seems really strange. I don't know if this is just because they wanted to fit more issues and make more bang for the buck. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's weird.
But
I like the inclusion of my last comment on this, the time trials. I liked the court case with the guy shooting himself. That was fun. That was interesting.
Oh yeah.
I like the idea of prosecuting Jen for disrupting the timeline. For there were consequences to her actions. I don't think it was handled the best way, but that stuff was interesting. The issue with Bone, I couldn't care less about. It's just don't give a shit. My favorite thing is Two Gun trying to argue, like, shouldn't Reed Richards keep the bounty for which he had rightfully earned? And the judge is like, would you sit this maniac down and teach him about the antitrust laws? And he's like, aw. And then it's so funny because later on, and I really love this. It was a little moment in the book that I was like, this is a very human moment for me. This is good writing, where he's like, maybe I shouldn't be a lawyer. There's a lot to catch up on here, a lot I don't understand, and my time as being a lawyer may have passed. And Jim's like, no, you're a lawyer. You should always be a lawyer. And Mallory's like, how about he's a grown man? You only let him make his own decisions. Right. And so I think he's like, I don't like not like a bounty hunter or anything, but like he ends up working for the law firm, like catching criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he gets the motorcycle the air cycle at the end, and that's a really fun shot of him and She-Hulk. I don't hate time trials, and I would like to. I know I've booked up our schedule from like now to eternity, but at some point I would like to get a copy of. I think it's actually out of print. I don't know how I'm going to find it, but I would like to. Sure you do. I would like to come back and finish and do the next volume of the Dan Slott She-Hulk.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad you had a good time. I did too, man. I
did. This is like the best thing we've read in a really long time.
It's
so funny because I'm so down on Marvel and DC for a lot of the things we've already talked about. It was nice to come in and read something that was definitively Marvel. It couldn't be any more Marvel if it tried. And I'm glowing this much about it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what they do with the character She-Hulk, because
Mm-hmm.
she's not a main enough character to where she's off limits to do stuff like this. You take other characters and put them in a situation like in the type of stories that they were writing or Dan Slott was writing here. They're kind of a sacred cow for a lot of people.
What happened with like Captain America when they made him Captain Hydra? It made the news and people almost burnt Marvel comics down.
Right.
Right. When they race swapped a lot of characters with the all new, all different Marvel, people are still crying about it.
Yeah.
Which I always, just as an aside, I love the fact that like I don't think it helped sell comic books. I think the all new, all different Marvel experiment has not been received. Has not worked out. But boy, did the films take the all new, all different Marvel and go, this is what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like maybe see if it works first.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm a firm believer of tell a good story.
Yep.
and then we, you know, we can get behind that if it's a good story, if it's a good story. But you could do that with brand new characters. It doesn't have to be the same ones over and over. Unfortunately, Marvel sometimes looks at it differently. But anyway,
who was the team? I don't remember what the name of the team was, like New Warriors or something like that, where like they did create a bunch of new characters. One of them was like non-binary. Oh, there was a character named Safe Space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. I cannot remember. I think you're on the right track.
There's your new characters for you.
Crap. Taking a look to see. Yeah, the new Warriors.
Yep.
And our character names. Oh, dang it, I don't have them here in front of me. Anyway, the new Warriors. Well, I had a good time, man. This was a blast. She-Hulk, 2004, 2005. Dan Slott did a fantastic job. Anything else you'd like to say before we head on out of here, getting the plugs?
I would like to say Night Thrasher, Microbe.
Microbe.
Where are the rest of them? See, okay, this is the whole list of new Warriors. I want the new Warriors.
I was going to say, Night Thrasher's been around for a while.
I started reading that list before I realized that this is not what I wanted.
Snowflake.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Snowflake and Safe Space.
Yep.
So good. And then there's Trailblazer. And oh god, who is this other character?
Oh,
fantastic. New Warriors is going to be Marvel Comics' biggest flop yet. Snowflake and Safe Space. What the fuck? We've also got Trailblazer, someone so obese there's no way she can keep up with the fight. And Screen Time, who got his powers from internet gas.
Internet gas?
Internet gas, yes.
Oh my gosh. I've had internet gas all night.
Oh my god, yeah, I have to. I sometimes get internet gas as I'm walking out of the jail, and I have to, like, you know, make sure I shut the door behind me.
Internet gas. All right, folks, we're done here. We've obviously gone off the rails. Let's get into the plugs.
Can we please get more Snowflake and Safe Space
Safe
comics?
Space?
You said create new characters, and they did, so we have to support them now.
I'll read it. I'll read the issue if it's a good story, and then and by golly, I'd read it.
What are Safe Space and Snowflake up to?
What are they up to? Well, all right. Let's get into plugs, Mark. What do you got going on over there on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network?
Well, by the time these go up on your feed, God only knows when that's going to be. Yeah.
Long time out.
In fucking June. So just check out at Mark Radulich on TikTok. I'm also Mark Kind, MarkKind 76 on the Instagram. You can check out the Radulich and Broadcasting Network on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. And then if you want to see my beautiful face, it's on W2M Network on YouTube and on Twitch. So, but if you were looking for just short clips of what we're doing, I haven't been as good. I've been busy lately. I haven't really had time to sit and edit as much as I should be. So I am now like over a month backed up on shows that we've done. Like I can just about kind of keep up on triple features because those are easy for me to cut. But everything else where I have to kind of dig in and re-listen to stuff and kind of find a good 10 to 30 minutes that I can use. Yeah, I'm backed up past December.
Oh, man.
So my TikTok I'm not keeping up with my TikTok quite like I used to. However, whenever Jesse writes a song about putting poop in a bag, that immediately goes on my TikTok. If I spend time with my kids and my son has a funny rant, that immediately goes up on TikTok. So
that's fantastic.
That's my plugs. I'm done talking now.
Oh, I am going to share this screen right here. Look at that. Look at that guy. I swear I'm talking to him right now. That's great. That is great. All right. Yeah. Hey, ladies and gentlemen.
Did you know that me and Dan Slott are actually a superhero team called Safe Space and Snowflake?
I'm trying to figure out which one you would be.
I'm totally Safe Space.
Your name would be Safe Word. That's what yours would
be. The safe word is banana.
Oh, shoot. Oh, anyway, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, check out the Source Material Comics podcast feed if you have any podcatcher out there, you should be able to find all of our shows that are in the archive. We have this one right here where we talk comics of any era. We have the Unspoken Issues podcast, which is in a association with the Unspoken Decade. We focus on 90s comics on that podcast. And then, of course, the Snap Material podcast. Me and Evan Bevins get together and talk about Snap, Marvel Snap, that is, the mobile card game. And we should be recording that here, I think, coming up this week. So if you want to keep an eye out for that, I think that's it. So, Mark, thanks for joining me on this journey. I am Jesse. Yeah, I'm Jesse Starcher. We are getting out of here. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Oh, shit. I forgot I was in charge of this.
He must end the show.